Giants owner John Mara on GM Joe Schoen. We feel like Joe has assembled a good young nucleus of talent. We look forward to its development. Unfortunately, the results over the past 3 years have not been what any of us want. We take full responsibility for those results and look forward to the kind of success our fans expect. Now, that's what we know. And as we've covered on this show over the course of the last 48 hours, it appears that at least for now, Joe Schoen will be overseeing the hiring process, at least for now, for the next head coach. So I'm trying to figure out, Caroline, what the hierarchy actually looks like here, because you've got to know who's in charge of what from the day people come in if you want to have a successful organization.
That's, I think, an incredibly underrated aspect of an NFL front office and an NFL team is organizational structure. Who reports to who gets credit for what, who gets blamed for what. I think that sometimes there are some blurred lines in modern day NFL front offices, and it never works. Collaboration in NFL leadership, it doesn't work. So if the Giants are committed to Joe Schoen, then they have to be committed to Joe Schoen. The Giants can't be going into this coaching hire and having Joe Schoen be a huge part of this coaching hire with the thought in the back of their minds of maybe Joe Schoen is looking for the next head coach who is going to ultimately fire Joe Schoen and look for his replacement. I don't think it works for head coaches to pick general managers. I think there needs to be a clear delineation of power. Your owner is at the top. Your general manager reports to your owner. Your general manager does the drafting. Your general manager does the free agenting. Your general manager constructs a roster. And the coach reports to the general manager. The coach's coach, the GM's GM. That is, I think, the most competent and well-oiled machine of an organizational structure in the NFL. If Joe Schoen picks the next head coach and things go south in New York, and then Joe Schoen gets fired, and then the next head coach picks the next GM, then I think that you are just finding yourselves in what I like to call the Tennessee Titans sea of suck. That you constantly have, a new GM, then a new head coach, then a new head coach, and a new GM. It doesn't work. You can't, it doesn't work that way. The GM needs to pick the head coach, and I think that the Giants need to be committed to Joe Schoen if they're going to let him pick the next head coach. Organizational structure matters, and it's underrated in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And part of this comes back to the very fact that I think the Giants' job is the most appealing job we've seen come open in several years. There's so much young talent on this roster across the board. And whether we want to credit Joe Schoen or just luck of the draw, I don't know. I don't care right now. Like, what I care about
is
the one
who also signed Russell Wilson. So, if we're going to give him the
100%.
wins, we also have to credit him with the big old losses.
But if you are looking at coming in as a coach, this is very simple. I got a defensive line that's absolutely electric. I got one of the best young wide receivers in the game. I've got a young running back I think I can build around. And I have a young quarterback that certainly is showing the potential to become a star. So if you believe you can come in and make the most out of a roster, this is a great job opening to have come out. Not just because of the talent that they have, but in part because of the age of the talent, the cost of the talent, the flexibility that they have around the talent. Like, this is not the Giants' job that has been open in the past. I think this is an epic job. So it becomes all the more important, because if you think that the number one thing you have to identify is a coach that can maximize Jackson Dart, for example, well, within what structure? They've got to know exactly how they're going to hire this. Is it truly a GM hires a coach to work with this quarterback? And if so, what does their pool of candidates look like? Because I think we'll come into this, it's not even close when we come into this offseason. The Giants will be a better job than any job that is open. And I'm not sure it's close over the last several years. The Giants are a better job than one we've seen come open in a long time.
We talked to Jory Epstein about this yesterday, which of course you can find on the Yahoo Sports YouTube page. She crushed it as always. She brought up ownership, how when you are one of the hot head coaching candidates on the market, it's important to look at ownership. And we compared the Giants opening with the Tennessee Titans opening. There's some, you can compare them because they both have young quarterbacks who these organizations hope to be the future of the organizations. Obviously, Cam Ward in Tennessee and Jackson Dart in New York. But compare ownership, because the Giants, yes, they've had a lot of turnover at the head coaching position in recent years, but the Giants have a long history of a patience with their head coaches, kind of how we view the Pittsburgh Steelers. In Tennessee, however, Amy Adams Strunk, she's got a quick trigger, that they've had so much turnover at GM and head coach that there has been someone in leadership that has been replaced in each of the last 4 years. That's tumultuous. And I guess in Tennessee, you're constantly always looking over your shoulder of, is today going to be the day that Amy Adams Strunk decides to move on from me because her fuse is so short? I think coaching and being part of an organization led by the Mara family is a more stable structure in the institution. So yeah, I think it's young quarterback who looks to be the future of your organization, paired with so many great skill position players. Cam Scadaboo coming back next year, Malik Neighbors coming back next year. One of the best defensive fronts in football that is just underachieved, I think, because of coaching. And I think that's why I look at Shane Bowen. Why the heck is he still in New York? Move on from him. He's part of the problem. I'm with you. I think this job probably compares to the Cowboys opening this past year. Obviously, Mike McCarthy's contract not renewed by the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, that's the Cowboys' job. You have Dak Prescott, you have a franchise quarterback, you have one of the best receivers in the league in CeeDee Lamb. They had one of the best young defensive stars in Micah Parsons. So I thought that was a very attractive job as well. But with the ceiling with this roster that hasn't even gotten close to reaching that ceiling with this Giants team, I think this Giants opening is definitely up there with one of the best openings that we've seen in recent years. Normally, job openings come because you have a totally dysfunctional franchise. I don't think the Giants are that. I think it's a franchise and a team right now that hasn't even scratched its ceiling.
So who should be the next head coach of the Giants?
Ooh, I think it should be Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy would be my pick, and he's been a name that's been thrown around a lot. But if I want to give you a little bit of a dark horse candidate, maybe a little bit more of a deep cut here, I'll look at Clint Kubiak. He's the offensive coordinator in Seattle. He's had a ton of success, obviously, in Seattle. What he's done with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Sam Darnold, I mean, the Seahawks look like legitimate Super Bowl contenders. He's also an offensive minded head coach. I think that's where the Giants should be looking because they have a young quarterback. They want to get the most out of their young quarterback in Jackson Dart. So I think they should be leaning offensive minded. And he's also young. I mean, Clint Kubiak is 38 years old. I think that would be a great fit with their young quarterback in Jackson Dart.
I love the idea of an offensive head coach. I do. I am scared of a
Mhm.
young head coach with a very young roster that hasn't necessarily been there before, unless he brings in a staff with him
It's
of
fair.
established people that have been there for a minute that aren't also trying to angle for a shot. Very weird, complicated dynamic. I would usually go offensive coach, but there's one name I can't get out of my mind that I think should be the next head coach of the New York Giants, and it's Spags. Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I happen to know somebody that knows Spags well, and it's been made clear to me repeatedly that he does want to be a head coach in the NFL. So there is no doubt, like for anyone that says, oh, he's content being the defensive coordinator in Kansas City. Now, Spags would love an opportunity to go out there and show what he can do again as a head coach. Also, he has experience. Obviously, he was the defensive coordinator for that Giants team that beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl, right? Like, so he knows New York so incredibly well. He's been around for so long. You're getting a calming presence of a coach that understands the league. Now, I do think it's important from the day he walks in that he has an idea on who his offensive coordinator can be. And if he can get the right opportunity to do this, I would love to see him with an offensive coordinator that is much like Josh McDaniels or Cliff Kingsbury, somebody that, you know, hey, look, I've tried other things. I'm back to this. I'm going to be here for a minute because I don't want a revolving door for Jackson Dart. So Spags would have to come into the interview with a great plan on somebody he believes can be an offensive coordinator that he believes they can hold on for multiple years. But when you want to talk about Kansas City and part of the reason they're dominant, I say this all the time. If you want to beat the Chiefs, you got to have the best quarterback of his generation, the best head coach of his generation, one of the best GMs of his generation, and the best defensive coordinator of his generation. Spags is one of those men. So give him the opportunity to go into a market that he knows with the defense that he can maximize, with a team and an attitude that he's going to understand in a city that he's familiar with. There will be nothing about the moment that's overwhelming, I should say, for Spags. And that gives him the opportunity to step in from day one with a really talented roster and a great talent on defense. I think they can make the most of that defensive line. Spags can turn them around quick.
I like that too because New York is a pressure cooker. Like, that's a really difficult job. That's a tough media market to be in. Spags has been around football long enough that he can handle that kind of pressure and he can handle that caliber of job. The other thing that you brought up that I think we also need to talk about is, and it's something that I subscribe to, of, you know, you got a young quarterback. What's the trend in the league is these young offensive minded head coaches. You don't necessarily need to have a young offensive genius as your head coach. What you would need is a head coach that's willing to defer the offense to a young offensive genius offensive coordinator. So the offensive coordinator can just focus on the offense. It doesn't necessarily need to come in the form of a head coach. I questioned that with Ben Johnson. Is Ben Johnson a better offensive coordinator than he is head coach? Is he a better offensive coordinator just focusing on the X's and O's of the offense rather than focusing on being a tactician? Time will tell. I like Ben Johnson, but we've seen some, questionable, iffy calls from him as a tactician rather than an offensive coordinator. So what Spags can do is bring in the best offensive coordinator that he can find. What does Mike McDaniel's future look like in Miami? Will he get, kind of get the boot in Miami, and maybe he'll be a better offensive coordinator than he is head coach? That would be a really fascinating pairing, I think. So I think it's important to find out that just because you want a young offensive mind in the building doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come in the form of a head coach.